Welcome to another edition of the Keep Africa Trading Podcast. TradeMark Africa's podcast that talks about all things trade across the African continent. More importantly, we have a guest with us from TradeMark who's going to give us an opportunity to better understand what TradeMark is doing in this space, and specifically at this conference that we're attending, the Africa Trade Development Forum here in Kigali, in Rwanda, which is running from yesterday, the 2nd of December, to today, the 3rd of December. Thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure.
So maybe you can tell us a bit about yourself, your name, and the role that you serve in TradeMark.
Indeed. So my name is Professor Dominic McVey. I'm one of the non-executive board directors at TradeMark Africa. So I'm responsible for the organisation along with several other board members and our chairman. We look at the governance, the strategy, make sure we're serving our stakeholders well, our donors well, but most importantly, making sure we're delivering for the people of Africa. Delivering trade and prosperity through trade and economic transformation, supporting whether it be informal traders, particularly women in trade, all the way up to making sure governments, revenue authorities can collect taxes, which is not the most popular word, but to provide the services that the people of Africa need, that they want, and that they should be expecting of. So we work at every level of society, right down to the informal, all the way across. I don't like to say up, but all the way across to government policymakers. And my background is I'm from the private sector.
Okay.
So I'm not a researcher. I'm not an executive of any organisation or charity. I build businesses. I'm an entrepreneur, and I came to learn about TradeMark Africa. At the time, it was called TradeMark East Africa, in Kenya, where I was investing heavily in the garment industry, particularly in Athi River, just outside of Nairobi. And we were able to create around 6,000 jobs in Athi River in less than 18 months, exporting about $50 million of goods a year to the US market under AGOA. However, we had a number of challenges, as you can imagine, when we started the business. And having spoken to the government of Kenya and others in the region, they said, you need to talk to TradeMark East Africa. They're working at the Port of Mombasa. So our challenges were predominantly around logistics and clearance of goods. And a lot of people perceive garments as a slow and steady product. But ultimately, fashion is just as perishable as bananas. It goes off that quick, unless you're selling a white T-shirt, which can also fluctuate in its demand. Fashion products need to get to market as quick as they're designed. So we're having a number of challenges with the port and clearing of goods. Some of that was teething problems. This wasn't necessarily the fault of the government of Kenya. It was understanding the market, understanding what was available, and understanding how to transact efficiently. And TradeMark, through its introduction to my organisation, enabled us to trade quicker, trade better, more efficiently, and build our business to a scale which had never been seen in the region for some time, and is now accounting for maybe 15 to 20% of exports and for garments in Kenya alone. So I, from the private sector, saw firsthand TradeMark unlocking economic potential for investors into the region, which in turn helped us build jobs, build communities, reinvest back into the people and the government of Kenya and the businesses that we were building, and see prosperity firsthand in a very short amount of time. And I can honestly say, if it wasn't for TradeMark East Africa at the time, now TradeMark Africa, we wouldn't have had that economic growth. So it's a real privilege for me to have gone from being a benefactor of TradeMark Africa to one is now that is a custodian of delivering that future for others, and most importantly, the people of Africa.
Can you be more specific around exactly how did TradeMark help you close those gaps that were possibly limiting the growth and suppose the speed at which you're able to do your trade?
So as an investor coming into the region, it's like a puzzle. Anywhere you go in the world. Now you turn up in France, there will be a lot of challenges and nuances to deal with. So ease of doing business is crucial. And Kenya ranks pretty high. I think it ranked about 57 in the world, which is above Italy. So I'd hate to think the challenges that may be faced there. However, piecing that puzzle together, TradeMark was able to identify, whether it's through the Kenyan Revenue Authority, whether it's through the local Chamber of Commerce, the shipping agents, the organisations, the cooperatives around the shipping agents, understanding the key players at the port of Mombasa. We had challenges as well, but it was an unfortunate timing where the SGR, the railway from Mombasa to Nairobi, had just opened. So there was a lot of confusion in the system. What could go by road? What could go by rail? So there was backlogs forming. Boats weren't calling at port. So a number of the challenges were outside the control of my organisation. Yet by working with TradeMark, we were informed of what those challenges were, looked at the options, but they were able to bring all the stakeholders and key partners together, whether that be from government to the shipping agents to the business community, and sit down with everyone and find out what was going wrong when the SGR opened and piece that back together, put that puzzle together. So I had bits of the puzzle, others had other pieces, but TradeMark could see the full picture. And by that, it's invested further into streamlining systems. We know, fortunately, I didn't turn up in Kenya in 2010, but I think there was something like 37 different documents you need to fill out to import or export goods.
It was that bad. Yeah.
Fortunately, when I turned up, it might have been 7 or 8. I believe now it's just one digital window. So they not only were they looking at the challenges of the time, they were identifying the challenges of the future. So for any business coming to Kenya now, of course, once again, you have to find those pieces of the puzzle, but there's less pieces of the puzzle to build the full picture. And that's what TradeMark has been successful at. It's what it's successful at when it held my hand. Its job's not to necessarily hold hands with international investors. Its job is to bring trade and prosperity. So it holds the hands of all. And I don't feel that I received any privileged treatment. In fact, I was very privileged to be welcomed to be an investor in the region of East Africa, in Kenya in particular.
I think that's a wonderful, story you've given us around how this relationship grew to the fact that you're now one of the board members. But also, more importantly, I think during this particular conference in Kigali, I think the big theme or the bigger focus thing is really about digital trade. And I'd love to hear your point of view around that, given the nature of your business, your involvement in TradeMark, and of course the theme of this conference.
Well, there is such opportunity with digital trade, as we know. The opportunity cost is even higher. The challenges are pretty formidable too. We have to be conscious that we don't drive digital trade into a digital divide. Those that are digital and those that are not. And we know here in Rwanda that they've been operating a digital single window, I think, since 2012 in their customs authorities. Now, fortunately in Rwanda, there is access to digital, whether it be iPads, computers, there's good network coverage. So I feel that the people of Rwanda are generally part of the system. But there will be other parts of Africa that we know where maybe only 30% of people have access to an iPhone or iPad or smart device, probably even less. So as governments evolve into these digital machines, we have to make sure that that doesn't become a top slice of society or business communities. And it's important for the government to remember that, because ultimately governments need revenue collection to operate. They can't take this decision that we'll just collect revenue off of those that can afford it to be a part of the system. We have to bring up and bring into the digital society those that can be left behind. You know, this concept of, well, it's going to cost us more to train, and I'm not suggesting this is happening, but I'm giving, playing devil's advocate where things may go wrong with the digital digitization of governments. There may be this concept, it's too expensive to train people, it's too expensive for the equipment, people can't afford the equipment, people can't afford the data packages. So we'll just focus on those that can. And no, that cannot be the case, because we have to have one society, one Africa, moving forwards through trade to prosperity. And by doing that, we need to rethink about our education systems. It's not just what was they used to call it, the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. If you can't use a computer, the 3 R's don't work. It's, so we have to really make sure that young people are in their curriculums from an early stage have access to digital education, have access to digital equipment. Because if we say we're going to move every informal trader to a smart device, it's not going to work. Okay, you've got local dialects, you have literacy challenges in some communities, you have connectivity challenges. I know when the World Wide Web came out and my mum was offered training classes to use it, my mum couldn't work it out. She couldn't get there. She was just never going to be digitized. And to this day, it's still not. I have to do her online banking. It's become a real challenge for me and my mother because she was never able to adapt to a smartphone.
That transition, yeah.
That transition. And the UK has become completely digitized. I mean, bank branches don't exist. A lot of places don't accept cash. So she loses her card. I have to log into an app. I have to do it for her. I'm traveling. So this is, I don't want to call these first world problems. These are problems which are starting to crop up throughout society, developed and non-developed. Those that are on the path to the economic prosperity, those that have already established their economic framework. And for that reason, digitization is going to offer huge benefits to those that are part of the digitized system. So TradeMark is doing incredible work at the future of trade, building in artificial intelligence, the need for additional data centers. Almost 700 data centers are required in Africa today. But it is also clearly and cohesively focused as an organization on making sure women in trade, informal traders, cross-border traders are part of the system, not left behind. And that's something that we must always keep in mind with our policies on digital trade. How do we make sure everyone is part of it and those that cannot be are not left behind?
Okay. Given your current proximity to what you do, the business you run, TradeMark, and what you were just describing, the inclusivity question around digital trade and making sure everyone is on board. What about the next 5 to 10 years? What are your thoughts around the future in this space?
Well, I think Africa is really well poised for the future of digital trade because digitization requires energy. And Africa has an abundance of energy. And I just got back from COP in Baku for COP29. I was representing TradeMark Africa amongst some other organizations. And what we're seeing is energy intensive industries are the next challenge. So we know that Africa can generate an abundance of energy from the sun, from wind, from hydro to some extent, although there is now climate impacts on the rivers. But because it has so much value in energy, it's now starting to identify energy-intensive industries. So, for example, in Namibia, they are going to be one of the world's first producers of green steel. Steel produced from iron ore in the ground of Namibia, put into a furnace and turned into steel from hydrogen in the sun. So no carbon impact at all, net zero steel. Africa is leading the way on this. Tunisia, I mean, this is crazy to me. Tunisia has built a cable funded by the World Bank to Italy. Tunisia is then connecting that cable to one of the world's largest solar plants, solar-powered energy plants, and is basically selling the sun to Italians. I mean, can you just imagine? Like, Tunisia is selling sun to Italians. So where the challenge, I think, in the next 5, 10 years comes is the opportunity. As we become more data intensive, as we look at artificial intelligence, the opportunity to run those data centers in Africa in a green, energy efficient manner, net zero, in fact, I suspect. But for me, the next step is those data centers, the raw materials, are coming from Africa. So it's not about just the digitization, it's the physical needs for digitization that I think Africa also has. I know it has the opportunity to not just be producing data centers from its raw materials that the value addition is adding in Africa, producing data centers and selling them to the rest of the world, but also powering them from the abundance of natural resources that it has. And I think that's a very powerful position for Africa to be in. But where I am slightly concerned with digitization and the evolution of artificial intelligence is potential inherent bias within those systems. Okay, we've seen this with DNA mapping. So a lot of medicines that have been developed through DNA and sequencing of DNA. But that has often been done on a Caucasian or someone that is living in the United Kingdom or the United States of America. It's not necessarily been done on someone from African heritage living in Africa. So the same goes with AI. The data that it's researching, the articles that it's reading, the history books that it's studying, all of this, to some degree, or a huge degree, should I say, has been written or conceived in outside the continent of Africa. So we need to make sure that Africa And look, Africa is, you know better than me, is so diverse. You know, this concept that I want to listen to African music. I mean, that's like saying I want to listen to Europe. It's not a country, right? The music in Morocco is so different to Ghana. The Tanzanians say that they've got more bass than the Nigerians. You know, everything is so different. But does AI understand that?
No.
And that's my fear, as we run on this digital transformative journey, that we have to make sure that the Googles of the world, the Microsofts of the world, the ChatGPTs of the world have and are focused. So that's something that I will be championing and advocating for with my friends and colleagues here at TradeMark Africa, with the people of Africa, to make sure that we're not building digital systems where the artificial intelligence is extrapolating the background data from a custom system in Europe. It has to be understanding the nuances, challenges and opportunities, and helping deliver those opportunities through the data that we have here in Africa. Fortunately, TradeMark has done a lot of work on that. Government of Rwanda has done a lot of work on that, as have others. So we're in the right position, but I haven't heard it discussed yet at the Africa Trade Development Forum, and I'll be discussing this today on my panel in that regard.
So there you have it. I think that's been a wonderful conversation. I think such wonderful insights coming from one of the directors of TradeMark, but also an entrepreneur who's managed to build his business with a very strong Pan-African footprint, enabling, including, and helping people of all backgrounds in Africa to succeed and be successful. And once again, thank you so much for joining us for this edition of the Keep Africa Trading podcast from TradeMark Africa. My name is Moses Kemibara. I've been your host, and we hope we'll catch you in the next conversation.